I'm not going to give a very long introduction. I think probably everyone knows who this is, maybe. Thank you very much, Dominic Cummings.
I'm not going to give a speech. Lawrence has asked me to do a kind of Q&A on the questions of how does power really work in Whitehall? How does number 10 really work? How does the Prime Minister's authority and office really work? Why does it seem like so much, why there are so many disasters, why it seems like repeatedly we have Prime Ministers who can't actually grip power. So I'll just talk for 5 minutes, and then we'll just then anyone can ask any questions or make any suggestions they want to. So first problems, then what to do about it. If you look back at the British state in 1800 under Pitt as Prime Minister, we had real responsibility of ministers. You had a PM who had real live player meetings. And who was very, very interested in the question of talent, and elite talent was taken incredibly seriously. The system of government looked much more like SpaceX in 2024, 220 years ago, than it does today in Whitehall. Now we have fake responsibility for ministers and a kind of fake meritocracy and a way of government which is essentially NPC ministers literally reading out scripts. Government meetings, including cabinet meetings, are now literally entirely scripted. People always think that this is a metaphor when I say it, but it's not a metaphor. It's actually the case. If you have a meeting with the Prime Minister, the conclusions of the meeting with the Prime Minister are written before the meeting starts. They're in a thing called Chairman's Notes. It sounds like Yes Minister, but Yes Minister is a training manual for Westminster. So the talent collapse is obviously massive. You have a huge collapse in elite talent going into be MPs and also going into the civil service. And now you also have the problem that you have a kind of reverse ratchet whereby the best people leave by their 40s and the worst people get promoted. So when I was there in 2020 during COVID, there were some outstanding, really, really able people, particularly in the Prime Minister's private office, where a lot of the superstar young talent gets put. Pretty much all of those people have left the civil service now, and that is a general phenomenon. What happens is that very smart, very able, dynamic young people, a lot of them are idealistic and they join the civil service at an early age, and then after 10, 15 years, they look around and they look ahead and they see who gets promoted and they see how the senior people spend their time, and they decide that they're going to leave. And then the absolute worst dregs of the HR department tend to be the people who are then promoted into senior management. Obviously, almost no one is ever now fired for failure. And they've now kind of instantiated this principle in their appointment of the new Cabinet Secretary. The new Cabinet Secretary, of course, was responsible for the total debacle of preparations for pandemic. He's the person who tried to get me and the Prime Minister to make the national message on COVID that we should all hold, quote, chickenpox parties. That was literally the permanent secretary in charge of DHSC who proposed the most insane, much worse than anything Bolsonaro ever did, policy. And the civil services response is to make him cabinet secretary. The cabinet office itself, people think exists to work for the PM, but the cabinet office does not see itself as working for the PM. The cabinet office sees itself constitutionally as working for itself. It's the cabinet secretary who promotes and controls the perm secs and other senior appointments in the system. And it's almost impossible to describe how tightly and how insanely the Cabinet Office runs this process. I'll give you one simple insight into how it works. In September 2020, we realized before it became big news, or really any news, that rapid tests were going to work. Because of the general implosion of the Whitehall system, we got a former commanding officer of the SAS regiment to actually take over organizing rapid testing, a brilliant guy. Of course, The Cabinet Office then said that he had to use all the normal HR and all the normal procurement and all the normal everything in terms of building his team. So, of course, the SAS guy says, well, it's going to take me the usual Whitehall period of time then. It's going to take 6 to 12 months. So even when the Cabinet Office is staring at thousands of people dying in weeks, it will always prioritize maintaining the existing HR, existing financial systems, existing procurement, existing everything. So if that's true, when they know that thousands of people are going to die in a few weeks, they did the same thing on PPE, or tried to do the same thing on PPE in the spring. If we listened to them then there would have been no PPE for the NHS in April. So it's important to remember, if they'll do that when they literally know thousands of people are about to die, imagine what it's like now for Labour ministers in any kind of normal time, when they say this is urgent. Now, at the time, the only way to round that problem was I had to get the 5 top people, 5 top officials in the country into the cabinet room and say to them, if the SAS dude doesn't tell me tomorrow morning that this has changed, I'm going to get the Prime Minister to fire all 5 of you immediately. And that was literally the only thing that would actually make them change their behaviour. As the power of Prime Ministers and the grip of Number 10 has failed over the last few decades, the Treasury obviously has taken more and more power, and this also is a disaster. The Treasury and its budget processes essentially vandalize the building of crucial capabilities, and they make any kind of long-term budgeting essentially completely impossible. The Treasury also is completely hopeless at cost control, and as Ben Warner said earlier, it's completely hopeless at analysis. So as this part of the government has taken more and more power, then its capacity for vandalizing has also spread and spread. So what to do about it? Leave aside the kind of blue skies if you want to kind of completely radically remake the state, pass loads of primary legislation. I'll leave that scenario aside for the moment. Here's a more practical way of approaching it. Number one, the Prime Minister's office has to take actual power for performance management of permanent secretaries and for other senior civil servants. They have to be able, the Prime Minister's office has to be able to say, these are our priorities, and we insist that the civil service actually delivers those priorities. At the moment, there is no process for doing that. What the Prime Minister wakes up every day and says, well, I wish this would happen, has no connection to what senior civil servants think their priorities are, has no connection to their incentives, has no connection to how they're hired or paid or anything else. So the Prime Minister's office has to do that. Secondly, you have to develop a team in the Prime Minister's office that can monitor what you really care about and then intervene and say and insist. The Prime Minister insists that the following people clearly can't do their job and these people have to be therefore replaced. That is completely crucial. And of course, those two things connect, right? The Prime Minister's office taking responsibility for the performance management and then creating this team that can actually insist on changing teams. You have to shift from the current closed caste system where almost everybody promoted to senior positions comes internally, and you have to shift to open by default appointments so that instead of everything being promoted from inside the system, the default mode for the system shifts to we are going to bring people in from outside. And the fourth thing is we need a Prime Minister who, as William Pitt did, fighting Napoleon in 1800, reminded everyone that he was First Lord of the Treasury, and the Treasury was put in its box. The power of the Treasury needs to be broken up. If you do all 4 of these things, then you can actually be a number 10 where the government largely controls the government. And it's important to note, all of these things can be done without any primary legislation. A lot of the arguments you see now with Doge and Trump and whatnot, where people are challenging a lot of things in the courts, and there's lots of arguments about can the president really do this, etc. In many, many ways, Trump's powers to control the system are much inferior to a British Prime Minister's, which are actually vast in all sorts of ways, both formal and informal. But this, I think, therefore points to, and this is the last thing I'll say, points to the heart of the question, right? Starmer could wake up and do these 4 things tomorrow. We started doing all of these 4 things in 2020, which is one of the reasons why there was such a huge media backlash, because the system obviously rightly saw these changes as existential to its power. So they briefed the media, this is a fascist takeover, the vote leave people are insane maniacs, etc., etc. But we started to do this in 2020. You don't need primary legislation to do it. The core of the issue in the British state for decades, really since Thatcher, has been that the key people in number 10 have not wanted to actually to govern. They see government largely as theatre. They see it as an NPC phenomenon. The ministers walk up Downing Street, they nod, they smile at the cameras pretend that the cabinet is the meeting that decides things, but the cabinet is complete theatre now. It almost never has any actual power over anything. I didn't even attend cabinet once in 2020, that's how completely irrelevant it was. But the ministers are happy with the system of it being a fake, and the officials, of course, are happy with the system being a fake, because it means that they get on with the true business of actually running the government. So both sides of the system have been happy over the last 30 years or so. And that's why people keep asking a lot of questions about about the Tories. The Tory MPs for 14 years didn't want to be live players. They were happy in their NPC role, reading out the bullet point scripts. So that goes to the real question. Unless we find, this ultimately has only a political solution. You can come up with plans about how to change how number 10 works. Lots of these problems are not very complicated to sort out. But we have a political class that hasn't wanted to actually govern, and that's just been content to sit there playing its role in this fake theatre, whilst the permanent system drives the economy, the MOD, the intelligence services, all these different parts of the system, while it vandalizes capabilities and drives us into this crisis that we've got now. Okay, I'll stop there.